Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to another episode of the Deen Seekers. If you were with us from last episode, we're going to continue talking about some topics that are very important, namely talking about shirk and the dangers of shirk and grave worship, but delving into a little bit more detail and what it has as the impact of this on us as an ummah. And for those of you that are watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and share this amongst family and friends. And also, you can listen to this on Spotify. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah. Not bad.
So, to get straight into it, inshallah, obviously, last episode we talked about different topics. And we briefly touched onto some very important topics as well. But we want to do a deep dive in one of these topics, a topic that is very important to our creed as Muslims, our beliefs as Muslims, and that is about that which the Anbiya and the Rusul, they came to call the people towards and warn them from, and that is calling them towards the Tawheed and warning them from shirk billah. So obviously, we know the story of Nuh alayhi salam in the Quran, and we briefly spoke about that last episode. But I suppose what we want to do this week is look into what happened to our ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How did we as an ummah fall into these things? So let's maybe look at something around this area, inshallah.
Inshallah, bi'idhnillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa zidna ilman. Ya akram al-akramin. So this is something which is very important, this whole topic. And I think it's important for us to discuss and know why this is something worthy of us talking about, worthy of us explaining, worthy of us bringing up. Is it a relevant topic? Is it something that should be concerning people? Are we talking about something trivial? And the answer is no. This topic is something that fundamentally concerns every single Muslim, because Allah created us to worship Him. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And the worshipping Allah is Allah's right over us. It is Allah's right that His creation worships Him alone, as we know from the hadith of Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anh, that has been narrated or collected by Imam Bukhari and Muslim. It's a hadith that is agreed upon, where he says that once I was riding with the Prophet ﷺ on the same riding beast, and the Prophet ﷺ asked Mu'adh, and Mu'adh was a young companion from the Ansar, but he was someone that was very bright and was very knowledgeable. He had a very high status in the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ and in the eyes of the Sahaba after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. He was known as a alim, a faqih, to the extent that the Prophet ﷺ sent this young man to Yemen to give da'wah to his people. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned the 4 companions that people should take the Quran from, one of them was Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anh. So he asked this young man, Mu'adh ibn Jabal.
He's also أعلم الناس بالحلال والحرام, most knowledgeable of them of halal and haram.
That shows his status as an alim. And the Prophet ﷺ, whilst he was riding with him, the Prophet ﷺ took this as an opportunity to educate him. And he said to him, هل تدري ما حق الله على العباد? Do you know what Allah's right is over His slaves? And Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anh said, Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam. Allah and His Messenger knows best. So the Prophet ﷺ then said to him, and some narration says that he asked him 3 times, and each time he replied, Allah and His Messenger knows best. And then the Prophet ﷺ informed him of the answer, that the right of Allah over His slaves and His servants is that they worship Him alone. This is Allah's haqq over us, over every single creature. And this is the basis upon which the whole of creation was created. As it comes in the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhuma, that Nuh alayhi salam, when he was on his deathbed, he gave his son some advice, a wasiyah, before he passed away. And he said, آمرك باثنتين وأنهاك عن اثنتين. آمرك بلا إله إلا الله فلو أن السماوات السبع والأراضين السبع كن في كفة واحدة لرجحت بهن لا إله إلا الله. That if the whole of the heavens and the whole of the earths were on one side of the scale and La ilaha illallah was on the other side of the scale, La ilaha illallah would outweigh them. And this is a meaning that there's various narrations that mention this meaning, the magnitude of La ilaha illallah. And why? And we need to link that back to the hadith, because La ilaha illallah is the statement that contains that right. That is the Allah telling us in that statement, none has a right to be worshipped except Allah. That right of Allah is contained in that statement, and that is the statement upon which the whole of creation was created. So if this right is being given to other than Allah, this is something that is fundamentally against the whole concept of being a Muslim, the whole concept of being a slave of Allah. So this is a very important issue. And another important point which I'd like to mention is that when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the best of this ummah, imagine the Prophet ﷺ has passed away and he has not even been buried, and the best of this ummah has to tell something to the companions, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. What does he choose to tell the people at this moment, the biggest tragedy to ever befall this ummah? He radiyallahu anhu decides to tell them, and think about that. He could have said anything to them.
Yeah.
He could have said to them that the Prophet ﷺ, don't worry, he promised you that you will conquer Persia and Rome.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. You will be successful. Or he could have said anything. What did he say? He said, "Man kana ya'budu Muhammadan fa inna Muhammadan qad mat, wa man kana ya'budu Allah fa inna Allah hayyun la yamut." That whoever worshipped Muhammad, then Muhammad has passed away. And whoever was worshipping Allah, then Allah is the ever living and does not die, does not pass away.
Reminding them of that purpose.
Reminding them of that purpose, that you are still alive, that purpose, that the reason why you accepted the messenger of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that has not died. That is still there. You are still a Muslim. You still have something to do until you die. You still have something to do. And this is from the great fiqh of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. That at that moment, his thought was to speak about Tawheed and remind them of Tawheed. People who knew Tawheed, it was not foreign to them. They knew it very well.
And knowing Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu being the one who was known for, I think it's Bakr al-Muzani that says, what made him greater than the other companions was حب لله والنصح لخلقه. So for him to think that what I need to be, if I'm going to be sincere to the khalq of Allah, what is the thing that I need to remind them of at this moment? And the first thing that comes to his mind is Tawheed, and reminding them of that is, subhanAllah, speaks volumes.
Yeah, and in another narration of there's a couple of narrations that mention the same story. One of them mentions the phrase that we just said, and the other narration says that the narrator says, the Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, and this is in Bukhari as well, that he reminded them of the right that is upon them. So what he said was him reminding them of what right is upon them, the right of Allah, the haqq of Allah. So this is why Allah created us, and this is what we have to know, and this is why we have to realize. If we do not realize why this matter is important, then that is the problem. And we say this, the reason why we want to open with this is because in light of all the things that are happening to Muslims around the world, Muslims in Gaza and what's happening to them, primarily that, but all the other things that are happening as well, you see people that say, put all of these things aside. Put these issues aside. Muslims are dying. It's time we put these things aside.
Yeah.
But there's a big problem with that. What if they are dying because of our behavior as a ummah and us violating the right of Allah Azza wa Jal? Because an interesting story in the Quran, Allah mentions about Banu Israel, that they fell into the sin of shirk. They believed in Musa alayhi salam, they believed in Allah Azza wa Jal, but they fell into shirk when they saw another people or another tribe that were worshipping an idol. So they said to Musa alayhi salam, اجعل لنا إلها كما لهم آلهة. The same way they have these idols, why don't you make one for us?
One for us, yeah.
And with that, and they eventually did, when Musa alayhi salam went to the miqat, the meeting with Allah Azza wa Jal, and the Samiri and the story of the Samiri and things that they did build a calf. And with that, the calf was the idol. Yeah.
Saying that, actually, we do need to go. I think we'll get into that about how he actually did it as well, which is interesting. Then he took the athar of the messenger that he saw. So we'll get into that one actually, I think, later on. But
So they built this idol. And they worshipped this idol, and with that they fell into kufr, they fell into shirk. But the point is, why I mentioned this story is what price they had to pay for their actions as a people. And Allah tells us in Surah Baqarah, when Allah says, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ يَا قَوْمِ إِنَّكُمْ ظَلَمْتُمْ أَنفُسَكُمْ بِاتِّخَاذِكُمُ الْعِجْلَ فَتُوبُوا إِلَى بارئكم فَقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ ذَلِكُمْ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ عِنْدَ بارئكم فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِنَّهُ هُوَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. That because of their actions, Allah ordered them and commanded them to kill themselves. And if you look at the books of tafsir, they tell us that a father would stab the son and the son would stab the father. Look at the gravity of the punishment and the consequences that they had to endure because of the sin they went through. And for us now, as the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is no more wahi. There will be no command coming from the sky to say, kill yourselves for you to receive forgiveness. But that doesn't mean that we won't have to pay for if we fall into these the sins like them, shirk. That definitely does not mean we don't have to pay for it. We have to pay for it, just like they had to pay for it. SubhanAllah. So if you care about the ummah,
that's from the justice of Allah as well. That SubhanAllah, may ya'mal su'an yujza bih. SubhanAllah, any evil that is done, there has to be a recompense. And even though obviously وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ, but if we're talking about shirk, in the shirk لَظُلْمٌ عَظِيمٌ, shirk is the greatest type of dhulm. We talk about, look at all the dhulm that's happening in the world, and undoubtedly that is dhulm that Allah is angered by. But we know that the one that is most angry, the one that Allah will never forgive, is a shirk.
إن
So,
الله لا يغفر
إن الله لا يغفر أن يشرك به. Allah will never forgive that. So surely there has to be some severe consequences, as was for Banu Israel.
Yeah.
Uh,
And the interesting thing is about the story of Banu Israel. This particular story is that Imam al-Razi in his tafsir, Mafatih al-Ghaib, he says in the tafsir of this ayah, in Surah Taha, اجعل لنا إلها كما لهم آلهة, Surah Taha,
yeah.
He says in tafsir that it is not.
And Imam Razi, by the way, who is he? Somebody that's.
Now I want to speak about.
Clear.
I want to speak about Imam Razi after. I'll mention the thing first.
Yeah.
Imam Razi says, because something very important about Imam Razi that should be mentioned. Imam Razi says in tafsir of this ayah that it is not possible that they asked Musa alayhi salam to place for them another creator and sustainer.
Interesting.
This is not possible, because no aqil would do this. Rather, he says, what is more likely, is that they asked him to create an intercessor for them. And then Imam Razi mentions the ayah of Surah Zumar that we mentioned last time.
Don't worship them.
ما نعبدهم إلا ليقربونا إلى الله زلفى. We don't worship them except that they make us closer to Allah Azza wa Jalla. And then he says, and if somebody says that why is that kufr, he says أجمع جميع الأنبياء, that all of the anbiya have agreed upon that worshipping other than Allah is, even if it is as an intermediary, it is kufr.
That's Imam al-Razi.
Imam al-Razi saying this. So to go back to what we mentioned, Imam al-Razi. Imam al-Razi is one of the most influential ulama in this ummah as a whole. He died in the year 606 Hijri. And firstly, he died before the birth of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. So he could not have been influenced by him in his views. Secondly, some people say, oh well, you guys don't agree with Razi, because Imam Razi was an imam for the other sects, the Asha'ira. He's a big imam in their madhab. They say you don't agree with him, but yet when it suits you, you quote him. So to respond to this, we say that we don't quote him. We don't quote him as an authority for us. We quote him because he's an authority to you. To show you that this thinking and what we are saying is not something exclusive to us, something not new to us. Sorry, it's something not that is not new. Rather, it is something that has been mentioned by ulama that you no doubtedly respect as well.
And also the fact that then it shows you that was the mindset of what they understood then as well. Before all of these, so this would have been before all these debates. And he has some more interesting quotes in his tafsir as well, regarding what constitutes shirk and what doesn't. Actually, sorry, just to go back, it reminded me of the ayah. You said of how that has an impact on us as a ummah. The shirk of Banu Israel, what that got them into. And Allah mentions another ayah, إن الذين اتخذوا العجل سينالهم غضب من ربهم وذلة في الحياة الدنيا. Subhanallah. That those who took the calf and they worship the calf, they will receive the anger of Allah, and they will be humiliated in this world. Allah made it clear that that they will receive humiliation because of what they did, worshipping that calf. So subhanallah, this is something that Allah has made clear in the Quran. So moving on from that, we've touched on an important topic that we need to go into now, and that is, what was this kind of mindset or understanding of those earlier generations, or those earlier centuries, about this idea, and what constitutes to be as shirk,
Mm.
and where did it start from? Where did we start seeing, like what we see today, where people venerate the graves and
Yeah.
start to call the people that are in the graves, making du'a to them.
Yeah. So in the first couple of centuries of Islam, this was something that was unheard of, unknown within Muslim communities. Rather, it was known that part of your identity as a Muslim that you worship Allah alone.
Yeah. And obviously, last week we touched on the fact that those Muslims in them times were debating with the Christians on this issue.
Yes, we were accusing the Christians.
Yeah.
But subhanAllah, there's an interesting quote, a sahih narration of Hudayfa radiallahu anh, where he says that you will follow the Jews and the Christians and everything, except that I don't know, will you worship the calf or not?
Subhanallah.
Yeah? Subhanallah. It's an authentic athar.
Hudayfa ibn Yaman.
Yeah. And it shows that they had an understanding that the ummah will deviate, unfortunately, in certain aspects, and also that it is possible for shirk to occur in the ummah. It shows that this was the understanding, because it's something that is also denied by people. The Prophet ﷺ said that shirk will not occur in the Jazira al-Arabiya, or I don't fear shirk for you, and they quote these kinds of ahadith, and they say, shirk, so we can't describe anything that someone who says the shahada,
like, even shirk. If somebody's outright doing the shirk of the people of Quraysh, because of that you just can't.
Just today, I saw a video on YouTube where two people, and they were from the Rafidah. They were having a debate, and you will never guess what they were debating about.
As in against each other.
Yeah. They were debating, can we say that the Imams are creators?
Subhanallah.
Can you believe this was a debate happening?
Yeah.
Where one was saying, yes, they create and we can call them creators. In fact, it comes in our books and whatever the arguments were.
Yeah.
But, subhanAllah, these are people that say the shahada,
Yeah.
But yet, this is the level they have reached in terms of the debates they're happening, that they are having. So going back to what
that's sorry, that's ajib, as in even Quraysh, Allah says in the Quran, وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, when you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they will say Allah. So that's something that's known as well, and they say the ai*imma or the imams يتصرفون في الكون, like they do things within it, but actually calling them creators as well.
So Allah understand. But going back to it, so Hudayfa said that you will do everything that they did, except that I don't know whether you will worship the calf or not. Meaning that he knew that it was possible, but he didn't know whether it will happen. So the Muslims were upon this understanding, and they were the rightly the Qurun al-Mufaddala. How do you translate Qurun al-Mufaddala? The golden generations, or not really golden, but the best of generations. Best of generations. The Prophet ﷺ spoke about the best of generations, which is, he said, my generation. ثم يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم ثم الذين يلونهم. Then the ones that come after them, then the ones that come after them. So that's the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, Atba' Tabi'in. So the era of the Atba' Tabi'in would have ended definitely around the year 200 Hijri, and then we find that in the 3rd century Hijri, which would be the 200s, a group appeared in Basra. This group was a secretive group. You could even call it a secret society. They were an occult group. Occult group, which means they were batinis. They believed in things that were hidden. Hidden truths. Like a secret society. Hidden truths. They met in secret and all that kind of stuff. But till this day, their ideas survive
Mm.
in their own writing. That they wrote a number of documents that document their ideas,
Yeah.
and they exist till today. Yeah, Rasail Ikhwan al-Safa. Yeah, they were called Ikhwan al-Safa, the Brethren of Purity. Yeah,
Okay.
and so the Brethren of Purity, and within these documents, we find in one of them where they mention this philosophy that they have,
Yeah.
this line of thinking.
Yeah.
They rationalize worshipping other than Allah.
Mm.
Remember, these are people that will have claimed to believe in Allah,
Yeah.
but they
Said the
said that we're generally not pure enough to worship Allah straight away.
SubhanAllah.
You know.
Yeah.
So what is more effective and better for us and more appropriate is that we pass our worship on to those that are more pure than us, and they then will pass our worship unto Allah Azza wa Jal. So make dua to someone that's more purer,
Saints and
a saint or something like that, and they will pass it on.
So
if you go directly
when they said saints, sorry, did they mean the dead saints? Or
So I'll have to go back to the document. Let me see if I can pull it up, to be honest. وذلك أن القوم الذين بعث إليهم النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام والتحية والرضوان كانوا يتدينون بعبادة الأصنام، وكانوا يتقربون إلى الله بالتعظيم لها والسجود والاستسلام والخبورات، وكانوا يعتقدون أن ذلك يكون قربة لهم إلى الله زلفى، والأصنام هي أجسام خرس لا نطق لها ولا تمييز ولا حسا ولا صورة ولا حركة، فأرشدهم الله ودلهم على ما هو أهدى وأقوم وأولى مما كانوا فيه، وذلك أن الأنبياء عليهم السلام وإن كانوا بشرا فهم أحياء ناطقون مميزون علماء مشاكرون الملائكة بنفوسهم الزكية يعرفون الله حق معرفته، والتقرب إلى الله بهم أولى وأهدى وحق من التوصل بالأصنام الخرس التي لا تسمع ولا تبصر ولا تغني عنك شيئا. ثم اعلم يا أخي أن من الناس من يتقرب إلى الله بأنبياء ورسله وبأئمتهم وأوصيائهم أو بأولياء الله وعبادة الصالحين أو بملائكة الله المقربين والتعظيم لهم مساجدهم ومشاهدهم. So he's talking about the مشاهد المساجد والاقتداء بهم وبأفعالهم والعمل بوصاياهم وسننهم على ذلك بحسب ما يمكنهم ويتأتى لهم ويتحقق في نفوسهم ويؤدي إليه اجتهادهم. فإن من so they've got quite a lengthy quote here, but the gist
this is from their Rasail,
yes,
and from their
Rasail. To be precise, Risala number 42. The 42nd treatise.
Okay.
So they're basically saying that the problem with the mushrikeen, the ones who are the idolaters, was that they are passing them on to things that have no effect.
Okay.
That which is not here or see. But if they were to pass them on to the Anbiya and the Malaika and the Salihin, that would have been effective.
And that's where in modern day they bring this argument of وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا. That don't think that those who've been slain in the way of Allah as dead. They are alive.
SubhanAllah, and you mentioned that one of the documents that we spoke about last week or last time
with the Christian debates,
the Christian ones, is a Christian refutation of Muslims. It's called a answer to the Arabs, written by a Syriac Christian called Dionysius Bar Salibi, and he would have died in the 6th century or 7th century Hijri. And one of the points he mentions, he says, objection, why the Muslim, he's talking about Muslim objections, why do you worship the bones of martyrs? That same objection, And his answer, subhanAllah, he says, doesn't God say in the Quran, the ayah, what's the ayah?
Do not perceive that those
تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. Doesn't God say that in the Quran? So he actually, the Christian uses that ayah. And then later generations, Muslims are the ones that start using the ayah. Which is quite interesting, subhanAllah. So yeah, so
I
this
mean, that's what we're saying. Like at the end of the day, shirk millatun wahid is it's all one
yeah, it's all
religion.
one,
At the end of
yeah,
the day.
it's
There's
all-
one mindset.
is one mindset. Yeah,
Yeah.
the arguments are the same. So this is in the Ikhwan al-Safa would have been active in the 3rd century and 4th century Basra.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have an idea where this idea kind of came from, and this is in a kind of systematic way that
Yeah.
they have a specific belief that then translates into committing shirk with Allah Azza wa Jal.
Yeah.
However, there may have been instances where, because of people's ignorance, it also occurred. Like where people, so for example, a pious person dies,
Yeah.
and this is narrated regarding the famous pious person Ma'ruf.
His name is Ma'ruf as well, yeah.
Yeah, Ma'ruf, yeah. Ma'ruf, he was
Ma'ruf was Ma'ruf.
till this day, his grave
Yeah.
is visited in Baghdad. Karhi or Kirchi, I don't know how, I forgot how you pronounce that. So he was a pious person who, I believe, died in the early 3rd century. Yeah, 200 and something Hijri.
Yeah.
And he was very well known to be pious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people would make dua his grave to Allah Azza wa Jal. Yeah. Not to him, to Allah Azza wa Jal.
Yeah.
And then some of them noticed that, the du'as are being answered. Yeah. And so there became a saying that was known. Qabru Ma'ruf tiryaqun mujarrab. Yeah.
Okay.
Is the grave of Ma'ruf is a known antidote.
This word mujarrab as well, you'll see as a pattern comes a lot.
Yes, exactly. So you can see this is because of people's ignorance, not necessarily something that is a systematic belief. You know, it's just, this happened, and it spreads rumors and a gossip that, look, his dua was answered at the grave. Mujarrab, you know,
tried and tested.
Tried and tested.
Yeah.
You know, and this is something that we find recorded by Al-Qushayri.
Yeah.
In the 5th century, I believe Qushayri is somewhere around the early 5th century. And also we find in the 4th century Hijri, the 300s, there's an interesting account regarding the sheikh, the state sheikh of the Batiniya, the Ubaydiyya, of the Ubaydi Empire.
Okay.
Yeah, who took over a large part of North Africa, and they were also Batinis. They were Fatimis, which is a branch of Shiism. Yeah. Afwan, Fatimis. They would call themselves Fatimiyya. Yeah. They were Ismailis. Yeah, Ismaili is a branch of Shiism, which is Batini. It's an a cult branch. Yeah. So their sheikh was a guy called Abu Nu'man al-Maghribi. Yeah. And he died in the year 400 on the dot. So he would have been active in the latter half of the 4th century. Yeah. And he mentions in an account that he is traveling past Iraq, and he mentions in his kind of like his diary or his account that he stopped at Karbala to pray to Hussain radiallahu anhu.
To actually pray to him.
Yeah. Okay. To do tawassul with Hussain radiallahu anhu. So this is something that is again recorded in the 4th century.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is something that many ulama, like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, when they spoke about the history of these practices, they pinned it to the Batiniyya. And so far, these are both Batinis, the Ikhwan al-Safa and Abu Nu'man al-Maghribi. Both Batinis.
You know what's interesting here? Just on the Ashab al-Safa, Ikhwan al-Safa, sorry. Ikhwan al-Safa. They you said they were like a secret society.
Almost, yeah.
Like they weren't. Were they doing these things in public? That would be interesting to know.
The thing about Ikhwan al-Safa, interesting enough, is that we barely know who was part of it. There's debates as to whether this guy was part of it or this guy wasn't. But like I said, then that's because they were a secretive group.
Yeah.
You know, because their views would have been deemed heretical.
Exactly.
By the Muslims at the time.
That's what I was saying. That tells you
mainstream.
It tells you about the time that they were in as well. What the mindset of the people were.
Yeah.
the general people would have been like, what are these guys doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another interesting quote we find is that of sorry, I slipped my mind myself. That of a Sufi sheikh, that's mentioned in Tabaqat al-Sufiya, I believe a book written in the 4th century. That mentions that when one of the pious people died, his followers made dua at his grave, came and made dua at his grave, and made dua to him. That's the apparent of it. And then he came to one of them or all of them in a dream, and he said, tell those, he came to someone and said to him, tell those people that were making dua at my grave, had they asked Allah, or if they ask Allah, Allah will answer their dua. So that's a very interesting one, because you can take it both ways. You know, was he speaking to them to tell them in the dream that don't make dua to me, make dua to Allah Azza wa Jal? Or was he saying, now that you have done this, and all you have to do is ask Allah, Allah will answer your dua because you initially made dua at my grave. So it's unclear where what it actually means, and that's also from the 4th century.
But what did the followers take from that?
We don't know. It's just a very small piece that's mentioned. And something else that is mentioned with regards to history is a quote that Ibn al-Jawzi mentions, or is his grandson Sibt Ibn al-Jawzi, one of the two. No, I believe it's Ibn al-Jawzi. Mentions that one of the muhaddithin of Kufa from the 6th century, whose name was Abu al-Ghanaim al-Nursi. He mentions that these graves that are present in Iraq is all the doing of Banu Buwayh. Banu Buwayh was a how would you describe them? A people,
like a tribe.
You could say, but they had the sulta. They had the power. They had the actual power, as you know, historically is known. The Abbasid Caliphate,
Salatin, ones that are in authority.
Even though it lasted a long time on paper, they were never they after the 4th century or the 5th century, they never breaking into smaller power. Even though the power would be taken by these different groups, like Banu Buwayh in Iraq, who are Rafida, by the way. And that's the point. So Banu Buwayh who are Rafida, and so in Iraq, Abu al-Ghanaim Nursi says all these graves were their doing. So again, we find the same pattern of it being a Shi'i thing to venerate the graves, to build on the graves, to build these mausoleums and shrines and tombs and all that kind of stuff. Historically, was something started by the Rafida. And
that's because, like you said, they were in authority, so they they could do that. They could go and do that because we're in authority. We can do what we want.
And then it did, obviously, as we all know, see around the world today, it's even practiced by people who say they're Sunni, who follow the 4 madhahib, whether they're Hanafis or Shafi'is or Malikis, or less so the Hanbalis. But and I will be done by them. But initially it came from the Shia, and then later on was adopted by the Sunni. So when we talk about that, last week we mentioned the fatwa of Ibn Aqil, rahimahullah, who died in the year 513 Hijri. He would have been referring to mostly actions of the Shia Rafida in Baghdad. That this was their thing. They would light these candles and make dua, and he says this is just like the worship of Lat al-Uzza and its kufr.
SubhanAllah. I mean, I was trying to think about the ayah. Because you reminded me when you said that they were ones in authority in Surah Al-Kahf.
Yes.
قال الذين غلبوا على أمرهم لنتخذن عليهم مسجدا. It's interesting, they Allah says here, غلبوا على the ones that were in authority.
Yeah.
They had control.
Yeah.
They're the
Taken
ones.
over the authority.
Yeah, they're the ones that said we're gonna take their place as a masjid.
Yes.
So I mean, subhanallah, it shows you that that's a sunnah there. The people in authority, when they come and they take control, they can do these things that perhaps weren't accepted previously.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of becomes like
becomes a norm.
it becomes a norm and becomes like accepted thing.
Yeah. No, you just saying that, you reminded me of Athar of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. You know? And where he says that I know when this ummah will be destroyed. Yeah? And then he said, when those that rule over them did not experience jahiliyyah. He says, لم يعالج الجاهلية ولم يصحب الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. And they did not accompany the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So they did not experience jahiliyyah, which means they don't understand tawheed. You know, because to understand tawheed,
and by extension, they don't understand shirk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they don't understand shirk, because in jahiliyyah, the Sahaba came from that shirk, and they understood the da'wah.
Yeah.
But people who come after them didn't see that, so they make it's easier for them to, misunderstand tawheed and shirk. And Umar radiallahu anh says that is when the ummah, and again it's the matter of the leaders, because he says man yasusuhum. You know, the ones who are in the leaders, in control of them. They are the ones that did not experience and deal with the jahiliyyah and did not accompany the Prophet ﷺ. So this is those two fundamentals of ikhlas and mutaba'. You know, there is no tawheed and there is no concept of following the sunnah and knowing the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah.
And you can always have that suhbah in terms of the sunnah is there for us, alhamdulillah, preserved for us to follow.
Yeah, so the way around it is for us to understand what jahiliyyah was about. Yeah. And then to understand what tawheed is about.
The divergent meaning of the mafhum al-mukhalafa of what Umar al-Khattab is saying.
And follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ.
SubhanAllah.
And it reminds me of another hadith. The hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anh, that's recorded by Bukhari and Muslim. I believe it's Jabir, either it's Jabir or Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. One of them narrates of the other. Yeah. I believe Abu Sa'id al-Khudri narrates the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anh, where the Prophet ﷺ says that the Muslims will fight an enemy, and it will be said to them that, is there anyone amongst you that accompanied the Prophet ﷺ? And it says فَيُفْتَحُ لَهُمْ, and they will say, yes, amongst us are those that accompanied the Prophet ﷺ, and so they will be given victory. A people will come after, and they will go and fight, and it will be said to them, that is there amongst you those that accompany those who accompanied the Prophet ﷺ? And they will say, yes, فَيُفْتَحُ لَهُمْ, and they will be given victory. Victorious. And then a people will come after them, and it will be said to them, is there amongst you those who accompanied the Prophet ﷺ? And they will say yes, and then it says فَيُفْتَحُ لَهُمْ. So they will be given victory. So now when we look at this hadith, we have to ask ourselves, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned this matter of accompanying. Was this virtue of accompanying for the sake of accompanying, meaning spending time and being close to the person, like physically? Physically, yeah. Or was this accompanying, the virtue of the accompanying, learning and following the Prophet ﷺ, following those who follow the Prophet ﷺ, following those who followed the Prophet ﷺ. You know, where does the virtue lie? And containing it specifically to those three generations as well. To those three generations. So again, that goes back to us when we talk about having victory in this ummah. Yeah. What is the secret to it? You know, it is in following the Prophet ﷺ, following the Prophet ﷺ through those who followed him, and those who followed them, and those who followed them. This is the key to victory. If we can do that again, that will inshallah apply to us.
Yeah.
فَيُفْتَحُ لَهُمْ.
Isn't there one? There's something that comes after that, isn't there? In that hadith.
Saying what?
I don't know if I'm mistaken, but they're like then there's some that come after them.
The hadith in Bukhari Muslim, I don't think that there is any ziyada as such.
Okay, I don't know.
You know.
I'm just trying to think of. We could check that one out, inshallah.
Yeah. So this is kind of going back to that early point. Why these matters are important. You know, following and the deen and preserving the deen. You know, never ever undermining issues that are part of the deen. You know?
And again, it's about knowing. We spoke about this last week, kind of about knowing what is the, you know, what are the conditions for the ummah to be victorious.
Yeah.
You know, like obviously said, being upon the deen.
Yeah.
The Sahaba, even you know, obviously we have in the Quran and Sunnah very clear, but even the acknowledgement of the enemy.
Yeah.
That these were through divine intervention that they won when they were victorious. And that reminds me as well to say, obviously, back to that point where we said, you know, some people might say, oh, you guys are always talking about, you know, tawheed and shirk. You know, maybe we should put these matters on the side for now and, you know, deal with these other issues. But what does that exactly mean? What do you mean by that? You know, and sorry, but just to go on that one as well. Even when we look in our history, like we were mentioning earlier as well, about some of great scholars that were involved in, you know, victories that happened in the ummah, that were involved in fighting and defending Islam, but at the same time they gave this its importance as well. Like, you know, Ibn Qudama and when at the conquering of Al-Aqsa. Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, rahimahumullah. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah, some of the ulama that were like some of these issues that people. I saw a video the other day where a brother mentioned the issue of, you know, the attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal. And he said, do we really need to talk about this at this time when Muslims are dying? And subhanallah, I thought back to those ulama that you know, fought with Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. They were a minority in terms of their belief at that time. We're talking about the 6th century Hijri. Salahuddin himself was not on their Aqidah, you know. Yet they fought with him and they did their duty towards the Muslims in that sense. Yet they are very well known for their positions in these matters. And they were very vocal. That didn't stop them. It wasn't a, you know, it wasn't a trade-off. You either do one or the other. You know? They did both. You know?
Knowledge and action.
And they went through trials because of it. Imam Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi. And these ulama are people that have a huge legacy. These are not, you know, not every alim is the same. These are absolute giants in this ummah. Their works are monumental till this day. Imam Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi, his book Al-Mughni in fiqh is one of the most important books in fiqh for any madhab, because it's fiqh al-muqaran. It brings the aqwal of all madhab. Imam Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi was a muhaddith. His book Umtul Ahkam from that time was explained and memorized by all madhabs till today. And explain how many explanations of Umtul Ahkam. And not that he also has, not only that, he also has Kitab Al-Kamil fi al-Du'afa. You know, one of the most important books in Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil, in the science of hadith and the biographies of the narrators. You know, that Imam al-Mizzi, who has an even more important book, is based on it. Tahdhib al-Kamal. His book is called Tahdhib al-Kamal. Based on the book Al-Kamal of Imam Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, who went through trials because of these issues to do with the Aqidah and the foundations of the deen. You know, yet they fought with Salahuddin and took part. And remember, also an important part of this story, of their story particularly, is that they were kicked out of their home because of the Crusaders. So you imagine these people are refugees. And they're taking part in the effort to liberate Jerusalem and Bayt al-Maqdis. Yet they had time and they saw the importance in indulging and engaging in these matters.
Yeah.
And people think today that, you know, the ummah will gain victory when we put these things aside.
But it just
You know?
shows, subhanAllah, like that, you know, نحسبهم الله وحسيبهم, that level of sincerity, first of all, towards Allah, that we have to make bayanul haqq, we have to clarify the truth, and all at the same time, we have an obligation as an ummah. You know, I have an obligation to the fellow Muslims. Like, today we have both extremes. We have the extreme that will say, no, you know, we can't do anything about that at all. You know, we can't have that sincerity towards the ummah and try to fulfill our obligations towards the ummah.
No.
You know, and there's just there's that balance.
Yeah.
Obviously, the priority is the deen of Allah and clarifying that, but also there is your duty. You know, and, subhanAllah,
and
those
ulama.
Yeah.
The flip side. So their story and their example is something that, you know, two different sides of the spectrum can learn from.
Yeah.
You know,
subhanAllah. Yeah.
there are those that say leave these issues, and their example shows why they're wrong. Then there are those that will say, oh no, don't get involved in anything with anyone that has might have a belief that's different to yourself.
Yeah.
In the giving victory to the ummah.
Yeah.
Until they accept your
and sometimes treating them as if they're not even Muslims.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, like, and we don't see that from these giants, from these people of knowledge.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. So, I mean, I think that's some important historical lessons for us in that.
Yeah, there's loads of historical. A lot of the issues that we find, there's parallels from the past. Another interesting quote from the same family again, the Maqadisa. Yeah, this was one family. There were cousins and uncles and aunties and all that, and there were many ulama amongst them. These two were cousins, Abdul Ghani and Ibn Qudama, rahimahumullah.
Cousins, yeah?
They were cousins, yeah.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, they were from the same family that was kicked out their homeland. They had an uncle, I believe it would have been their uncle, or maybe their cousin, who was an alim.
Yeah.
And again, subhanAllah, he think about what his family is going through, what they're going through.
Yeah.
And he has a quote where he says that the most important thing that you can fight your enemy with is knowledge, is ilm. And think about that. Think about someone who's being physically attacked, kicked out their home as a refugee, and is involved in the effort to liberate the land, with a military force. Yet he is saying to you, the most important thing that you can prepare for against your enemy is knowledge, is having the ilm.
It's interesting. There's somebody that's I can't remember who it was. It was like a Muslim general, and he's like quite recent, and he actually mentions that one of the best things that he found was when the Muslims were training, is they also did like halaqatul ilm, teaching them, and he said those that took their studies serious and was wanting to know their deen, understand their deen, they were the ones that thrived when it came to the training, and he said the other ones, we just tell them, were you with us? Go back home. Yeah. Those that didn't give the concern to the deen. So subhanallah, we have to see that, and that all comes down to the basic concept that the nasr comes from Allah. It doesn't come from your numbers or from your the materialistic side. Those things are all secondary. The primary goal is ترجعوا إلى دينكم, to come back to your deen.
Yeah, subhanallah. Yeah. And after them, subhanallah, just reminded me, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah,
yeah,
his family was kicked out of Harran. Yeah, they were because of the Mongol invasion.
The Mongol,
yeah, at their time. That was the fitna of their time. They were kicked out of their home. They had to settle in Damascus.
Yeah.
And then the Mongols, when they came to attack Damascus, in one particular battle, Shaykh al-Islam, he was part of a physical military resistance effort. Yeah. And he took part in fighting them.
Yeah.
And he mentioned to them, he kind of gave them a speech, the army, and he reminded, what did he remind them about? He reminded them about Tawheed. He said to them that you are going to these graves. He mentions in the Kitab al-Istighatha.
He's speaking to the Muslim soldiers.
Yeah, the Muslim soldiers. He goes, you're going to these graves expecting victory.
Yeah.
But your victory will come when you make dua to Allah Azza wa Jal.
Allah.
rather than these graves. And he says that, and after the people listened to his advice
Yeah.
and turned to Allah Azza wa Jal, they were victorious in that battle. After
Subhanallah.
previously having, being defeated by the Mongols and things like that. So these things are intrinsically linked.
But that's amazing. Going back to that point, I mean, that just again just shows you that look at Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. He didn't cut himself off.
Yeah.
He had that knowledge. He knew Allah had guided him to see the correct way and but look at the nusх that he had to the ummah.
Yeah.
Even though he knows that he didn't just say, I'm just gonna get away from these people. No, these are my brothers. These are my ummah. I have a duty towards them.
Yeah.
I have to educate. That is what unfortunately we lack.
Yeah. He didn't say, you lot are mushriks.
He didn't free himself off them and say, I've got no obligation towards you, or I don't want anything to do with you. No, he had that these are subhanallah, this is the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he had that that concept of islah.
Yeah, exactly.
Subhanallah, that is what those great ulama had. That they if you look at all these giants that we know, their objective was islah.
Rectification.
To rectify.
Reform. Yeah.
Subhanallah. Yeah. So wrapping up, any closing? Let's look at some sort of closing remarks on this. Just to, I don't know how can say, what our final thoughts. I mean, we kind of discussed them all, but just to kind of put it in a nutshell.
I think to wrap up, inshallah.
Yeah.
Never ever undermine those things that Allah has given a makana and a place in this deen. Allah created you to worship Him and to recognize Him, and anything to do with that always takes priority. Is never something that is secondary. And also there is our path towards victory in this dunya is something that is dictated to us by Allah Azza wa Jal in His book.
Yes.
So sometimes it's as if the people who make the kinds of remarks that put these things aside and all this kind of stuff, it's as if they're saying no, we can figure out our own path to victory. Because if Allah is telling you one thing in the Quran, this is why people are in these situations, and until they change, they will find themselves in hardship.
Yeah.
And then there's someone saying, they put these things aside, but you've gone against the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal.
Yeah. There's a lack of contemplating over the ayat of Allah. Allah is the one who's sent you these ayat for a reason.
Yeah.
And you just don't want to contemplate. You just want to I know I've got this. I understand my own through my own way.
It's like we've gone to IKEA.
Yeah.
And we've bought a flat packed desk. Yeah. And one of us has pulled the instructions out.
Yeah.
And the other one's insisting, no, I know how to do it. You don't need the instructions. And the other one's saying, no, the instructions are here. This is how we have to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the example and the parallel of what's happening. Allah has given us the instructions. How to get ourselves out of these situations where we've gone wrong, and all these things are all in the Quran if we ponder upon it. So I don't believe that this is what those people intend to go against the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. But this is something they perhaps haven't
out
thought
of ignorance,
about.
out of ignorance, because they're obviously they're very obviously we give them the benefit of the doubt that they're very passionate and they want to do good.
Yes, they want to do.
But then again, like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, how many people wish to do good, but they didn't achieve it. And subhanAllah, that's because of like the things that we mentioned, that they didn't glorify what Allah has glorified. They didn't see what Allah has seen to be important. And they didn't have that also the following of the Sunnah, following of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions and those who came after. Those were the victors of this ummah, the greatest victors ever. So surely, if the Sunnah of Allah, وَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَحْوِيلًا, you'll never find a change in the Sunnah of Allah. Those great victors of this ummah, what they were upon was clearly the recipe for success. why would you want to abandon that recipe?
Yeah.
Why would you want to
Yeah.
turn your back from that?
Yeah.
So, subhanAllah, I think there's some very powerful lessons to be learnt in that, in just
Inshallah,
looking
we hope
back
so. We hope
at
so.
that. Inshallah. We'll finish there. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.